And so when we walk through this chapter, this brilliant chapter, I'm going to construct it for you, because if you don't see the construction of it, it's not nearly as exciting. And so if you will bear with me, I just want you to see something. It really starts in chapter 12 and ends in chapter 14. It starts with the last verse of chapter 12, verse 31, and ends with the first verse, chapter 14. You say, why did they do that? I don't know. But those verses belong together. And so if you look at chapter 12, verse 31, you see the first verse really of this section on love. He says, but earnestly desire the higher gifts. If you were here last week, we talked about spiritual gifts. These higher gifts, we'll talk about them more next week in chapter 14. Prophecy and these things where people can be edified. He says, earnestly desire the higher gifts. The word earnestly desire is the root for the word zealous. Zaleo. Be zealous about higher gifts. But then he says something really strange. He says, you continue to be zealous for higher gifts, but I'm going to show you even something more excellent. I'm going to show you something, it's an even higher pathway that's even superior to this. Don't stop desiring or using spiritual gifts, but this is the higher way. That's verse 31. What is this excellent way? Well, jump to the end of our text. There's two bookends, and you'll notice the bookend in verse 31 of chapter 12 is earnestly to desire the higher gifts, and I'm going to show you what the excellent way is. Well, after he shows us the excellent way, look at 14 verse 1, he says, pursue what? Love. And earnestly desire the spiritual gifts. That's how we know that's the bookend. It begins with earnestly desire the spiritual gifts and ends with earnestly desire the spiritual gifts. But I'm going to show you a higher way, and in the end, he says, here's your commandment. Pursue love. Every step of this way, every step of your spiritual journey, you must be pursuing love. Earnestly desire the gifts. There's a little difference between desiring and pursuing, isn't there? I can desire a fish to jump out of the lake into the boat and into my freezer. Right? I can desire that. That would be quite a gift, and God could do that if he wanted to. Well, he does. It's called Publix. But anyway, we could just say desire it, and then jump out of the lake into the freezer. But love is something we have to pursue. We get the word prosecute from that word pursue. It means to go after. Love is not something that is just a gift, and this kind of love is a gift, but it is a gift we must go after. We must pursue it. Desire the gifts. Those gifts are from grace, are just of grace, and if God desires to give you the gift of prophecy or the gift of teaching or the gift of ministration, he may do that. But that's up to God. This love is not up to God. He's poured that love out in your heart. It is now time for you to live that kind of love. Now, we got to stop right here and do a lesson that most of you, if you've grown up in church, you've heard this lesson over and over again. It was your first introduction to New Testament Greek. I guarantee you, 90% of you, this was your first introduction to New Testament Greek. You were told there's 2 or 3 different words for love in the Greek New Testament. You remember what those are? There's phileo love, which is friendship love. That's kind of love I feel for you. We come together, we fellowship, and I just feel all sorts of phileo for you, right? Because we like each other, most of us, right? We like each other. It's phileo. And then there is eros, where we get the word erotic love. That's romantic. That's passionate love. That's kind of that love we have with our spouses and all that kind of stuff. So the eros is that's not what we share a lot of, you know. There's a limited group. So we got phileo, we have eros, and there's sturgo love, which you probably hadn't heard about. That was a word they would use. It's more of that natural family affection. You love your children. You love your family. And so we have all those kind of loves, and everybody has that love. Lost people have that love. People without Christ, people of every different religion have eros, and they have phileo, and they have sturgo. But you know there's a different kind of love, and it's the love that's mentioned here, and it's called what? Agape love. I told you, some of y'all know Greek. Agape love. What you may not know is that they had to borrow steal this verb, this word out of the Greek language. Because the apostles who knew Jesus and knew the kind of love that he was commanding knew that eros, phileo, and sturgo was not that kind of love. And not even the original use of agape. It was used very little in ancient Greek, very little. It didn't have the full meaning of Jesus' love. So they were stuck. They were trying to figure out, how do we describe the kind of love that Christ demonstrated and lived out for us and that he's commanding us to have for one another? We don't have a word for that, so we'll just make one up. We'll take agape and we're going to fill it with the meaning. And what is agape love? How does it differ? Agape love is not a feeling. I mean, you might feel it. This is not a feeling. And our culture says all love's got to be a feeling. I've got that love and feeling. Greatest gift of love. Greatest of all. I've got that love and feeling. Agape love may or may not be a feeling. Agape love is a fruit of the Spirit. It is a focus on others, and it is a freedom from self. It is a fruit of the Spirit. It's a focus on others, and it's freedom from yourself. It is a sacrificial love that voluntarily suffers inconvenience, discomfort, and even death for the benefit of another without expecting anything in return. Agape love is a different kind of love. And Paul says, this is the kind of love that you're missing, church. If I turn the mirror on it, I want you to know. And so here's what he does. He flips the mirror and he says, all right, we're going to deep dive and I'm going to show you just what this love is like. I want you to see it up close. And one of the things he says, you need to know this love is critical. Look at verse 1 of chapter 13. If you don't have this kind of agape love, maybe the church is extremely friendly and we got all sorts of phileo. We got all sorts of stirgo. We love our families. We love our children. You just got love and feeling when you come in here. But if we don't have agape, look what it says in verse 1. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. The tongues of men, you're hearing me speak a language this morning. He even says the tongues of angels. And really don't have any biblical rationale for why he said tongues of angels. Maybe that was just the way he was talking about speaking in tongues and our heavenly language. We don't know that there's a heavenly language. We don't know what the angels speak. It might be Southern English. I don't know, but we'll find out one day. But I doubt it. But even if you spoke with heavenly language, if you don't have that kind of self-sacrificing agape love, look what he says. You're like a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. I already mentioned maybe Paul and the people that he's writing to would have immediately, maybe even during their church services, they could hear people banging, flattening out brass, turning them into mirrors. They could have even heard, I'm sure they would have walked through the markets. And I've walked through markets like this in different places around the world where they're banging out pots and pans and they're making and fashioning metal things. They would have heard that everywhere. And you know what? When you walk through a bunch of people banging on pots and pans, it is an offensive noise. It's loud. And so what he's saying is your message may move the people, but your message may be like a clanging cymbal in the ears of God. He's not saying the message that you deliver or the teaching that you deliver or the encouragement that you give doesn't have effect, because it can. God's word will not return void. You can be preaching a great message, but what he's saying, if there is not a love motivation in your heart, or the rest of your life's not characterized with this kind of agape love, then your message may work, but it's offensive in the ears of God. It's like clanging cymbal. Even more offensive, and most commentators would say he's kind of referring to the worship of Cybele and some of the other idols where there was a lot of banging of gongs and clanging of cymbals that were a part of idol worship. This is harsh, isn't it? He says, look in the mirror. You might be preaching and teaching some mighty messages, but if you don't have agape love as a characteristic of your life, it's offensive to the ears of God. That's why Jesus said, like I mentioned last week, on the day, the judgment day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? I was preaching and it was working and people responded. Did I not cast out demons in your name and do mighty works and use all my spiritual gifts in your name? And then he turns to them and he says, I never what? Knew you. And he goes on to say, you were workers of lawlessness. In other words, you didn't exemplify that kind of agape love. You didn't love your enemies. You were great at preaching to your friends, but you didn't love your enemies. You were great at delivering encouragement to the people you like, the people that were like you, but you just couldn't bear being around people that were draining, people that required you to be forgiving, people that required patience. You just kind of cut them off. And Jesus is saying, you should be glad I didn't do that to you. Now go and do it to others. And then in verse 2, he says, or in verse 3, he says, if I give away all I have, or I skip verse 2, I don't want to do that. Verse 2, if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. I think it's important for you to see that the mountain moves, the spiritual gifts are used, but the quality of the worker is nothing. I think that's important. And so we can look in the mirror, and if we look on this side, we say, hey, we're doing a lot of great ministry. I'm doing a lot of good things. I'm using my gifts. And then we turn the mirror of agape love and we go, uh-oh. I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. And I'm only doing it for people that I like, people who respond well, people I get along with. But as soon as my patience is tried, as soon as I have to bear all things, hope all things, and I get envious and jealous when people get more things than me, or their spiritual gift is better than me, we flip the mirror towards agape love and we go, uh-oh. I'm moving some mountains with my faith, but in the eyes of God, I am nothing. You see the importance and necessity and indispensable nature of agape love?